Hello everyone, welcome to Nutrition Nerd Academy. This is Binyam Tesfaye. Today we will discuss about nutrient metabolism in the specific case of organs and systems, in the case of the role of stomach. This is section 3, part 2. At part 1, if you remember, we were discussing about the oral cavities and esophagus. Now we are continuing our discussions about the organs which have a role in nutrient metabolism. Today, our discussion point is stomach. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Our today's learning objective is plenty. We will gonna define the stomach and its role in the digestive system. We will also identify the part of the stomachs and describe their respective functions. We will also identify the role of stomach glands and cells. Then we will explain the compositions and the role of gastric juice in digestions. Then we will also discuss about the regulations of gastric secretions and also describe the transit times of the food through the stomach and its significance in the digestion process. Then after we will discuss the actions that occurs in the stomach, which includes mechanical and the chemical digestions, and also we will explain their final outcomes. Finally, we will summarize the role of stomach in the digestions or the nutrient metabolism process. After we finish this, we will have a quiz to check whether we understand this concept or not. So it will help us to evaluate our understanding. Then we will know where to focus. Then after, I will introducing you the next video or the next lecture. Finally, as always, which is my favorite part, I will suggest a music for you to listen after the end of each lecture. Today I prepare one music for you. I hope you will like it. And I will put the link for you in the comment section so that you can listen the music. So let us start by the recapping of the previous lecture. As we discussed last time, every day we will eat food products and we need to digesting it. And the final goal of the digestions and the absorptions of the food is to make the food into its simplest form of nutrients to reach into the cells. As we discussed last time, human beings, especially adults, have about 37 trillions of cells. So each cell requires nutrients in the form of like the most simplest form possible for utilizations, and then based on that, the cell will have its own proper functions. So as a starting point, last time we discussed about the oral cavities and esophagus, their role. As we discussed last time, the oral cavities is serving as an entry point to the digestive tracts and play a critical role in the initial stage of the digestions. And the main functions of the oral cavity includes the mechanical digestions and the enzymatic digestions. And the nutrients to be digested in the oral cavities that we were discussing last time was carbohydrates by the salivary alpha amylase or CLAN enzyme by hydrolyzing the internal alpha-1,4 bond within the starch. We will discuss more about these bonds and how it's breaking down by the alpha amylase when we are discussing about the carbohydrates section. The other nutrients that are digested in the mouth chemically is lipids by the lingual lipase. Actually, the lipid digestion is very, very minimal in the oral cavity by the lingual lipase. As I said last time in the previous lecture, This lingual lipase is more active during the childhood, and it's helping for infants, which enhance the digestion of triacylglycerols in milk. But its action is very limited, and as we grow up, this lingual lipase activity is actually diminishing over time. The final product of the oral cavity that we discussed last time is called a bolus. A bolus is a semi-liquid mass. And this semi-liquid mass, after leaving the oral cavities, it's directed into the esophagus. And above, there is a connections between the esophagus and the oral cavities, and there is also a sphincter called esophageal sphincter. This is a very controlled muscles that are around our esophagus, which is at the tip of the esophagus, where the first bolus is entering into the esophageal system. And this esophagus will have muscles which is relaxed and contracted while the food is passaged through it. When the food and liquids are passing through the esophagus, it's relaxed and contracted and create like a kind of a rhythmic movement, which is called a peristalsis, which is a very coordinated muscle contractions, and it allows the bolus to pass through the esophagus and to reach into the stomach. And in between the esophagus and the stomach, there is a sphincter called lower esophageal sphincter. This lower esophageal sphincter has two roles, meaning it allows the bolus to entering into the stomach in a very controlled manner. So it opens and closes. Then it also protects the esophageal systems from the backflow of the acidic environments of the stomach into the esophagus. Since esophagus do not have a mucus that protect it from the stomach acids, uh, it has to be closed properly. But sometimes, due to some reasons, these stomach acids will be back reflexed into the esophagus, and it creates like a heartburn kind of things. So this is its role. So after leaving the esophagus, the bolus will get entering into the stomach, which is our today's main topic. The stomach, once the bolus of the food has passed through the gastroesophageal sphincters, it is entering into the stomach. And this stomach has a kind of J-shaped structure, the word J, the letter J-shaped structures, and it's a kind of sac-like muscular organ, which is situated at the upper abdomen, which is positioned between the esophagus and the small intestines, and it usually found, actually it's found at the left parts of our abdomen, or at the left sides of the diaphragm. The stomach contains four main regions. These are actually very important. These four regions include the cardial region. The cardial region is located below the gastroesophageal sphincters, and which is the first part of the stomach, which receives the swallowed food in the form of bolus from the esophagus. Then the next part is the fundus. The fundus is around here, which is located adjacent to or lateral to the above cardial regions. And this fundus is very important because it's the one which relax and contracts while the food is entering into our systems. And when we are eating like large amounts of food products, the fundus started to relax and create a space for the incoming foods. And the next region is the body. The body is the largest part of the stomach, which is a large central region, primarily serve as a reservoir for the swallowed foods, and is the main production site for gastric juices. So the body covers like the large majority of the stomachs, and which is found at the central part of the stomachs, which is responsible for the large majority of the gastric juice productions. We will discuss it further later. And the four regions of the stomach is called antrum or pyloric portions. This is the located the lower distals part of the stomach, which is the lower end of the stomach, which is 1/3 of the stomach, and provides a strong peristalsis or rhythmic movement of the stomach to grind and mix food with gastric juices, and finally forming a chyme and empty chyme into the duodenum. Chyme is a semi-liquid final products of the stomach digestion process. In addition to that, the stomach has 3 layers of muscles. These muscles forcefully contract and relax the muscles which enable the food to mix with gastric juices to form a chyme. These layers include, the first one is longitudinal muscles. As you can see in this picture, this is a longitudinal part of the muscles. And the second one is a circular muscles, which is circulating or found in the circular shape, which is surrounding the stomach. And the third one is a diagonal muscles, as you can see it here, the diagonal muscles or oblique muscles layer. So these muscles layer are the one which forcefully contract and relax and make the physical digestion process inside our stomach. The stomach has also a rung or a fold inside, and this is the lining of the stomach which has many folds, and we call these folded structures of the stomach called rug. And at the stomach fill with foods and drinks, these folds started to flatten and allow the wall of the stomach to expand so that it accommodates the incoming foods and liquids or drinks. So, having said that, the stomach, when we see it from the outside to the inside, there are different layers and structures of the stomachs. We will describe it each one by one. The first one is the serosa. The serosa is here, which is also known as the visceral peritoneum, which is the outermost layer of the stomach wall, the outermost layers of the stomach wall. And the main functions of the serosa or the outside part of the stomach is providing protections and lubrications to the stomach. Lubrication is very important because it protects the stomach from some kind of friction with other organs. Actually, other organs which are adjacent to the stomachs have also lubrications, which makes it like a very smooth interactions. So the serosa provides protections and lubrications to the stomach, and it's around found here, which is contains like kind of connective tissues and layers. The second part is muscularis. This muscularis contains all of the muscle layers that we discussed earlier, which includes the diagonal muscle layer, the circular muscle layer, and longitudinal muscle layer, which collectively known as muscularis. And these fiber are arranged in 3 layers, as I discussed earlier, and these muscles contract and relax to facilitate the mechanical digestion of foods and movement of foods through the stomach. And the next layer of the stomach is called submucosa. Submucosa is a layer of connective tissues located beneath the muscularis, and it contains blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, and nerve that supplies the stomach wall different kinds of signals and also nutrients for the stomach. The next part is called mucosa. Mucosa is the innermost layers of the stomach wall, and it consists of epithelial cells, connective tissues, and small glands called gastric glands. You can call them gastric glands. So that these gastric glands secrete mucus, enzyme, and gastric juices, which are involved in the digestion process and also protect the stomach lining from acidic gastric juices, meaning these glands produce mucus. The main purpose of the mucus is protecting the inner parts of the stomach from self-digestions by the producing gastric juices. The enzyme and the gastric juices that include hydrochloric acids, electrolytes, and some and other components are doing the chemical digestions together. We will discuss each one by one later. And the final end is this gastric pits. These gastric pits are a small invaginations in the mucus, in the mucosa layer of the stomach lining with a specialized cell that secrete gastric juice, including hydrochloric acids and enzymes into the stomach lumens to aid digestions. These invaginations can create a kind of tubes, but it can also lead to other shapes like pouches and cavities where the cells are found and produce their respective enzymes and gastric juice components and mucuses as well. We will discuss this invagination part of the mucosa a little bit later. So let us discuss the stomach gland next. The stomach contains different types of glands, basically 3 types of different glands located in specific regions. And here are the breakdowns of the main types of the stomach glands and their locations. The first gland is called cardiac glands. The cardiac gland is located here at the cardiac regions that we discussed earlier. In these regions, there are specific glands called cardiac glands. So they are found in a narrow rim at the junctions of the esophagus and the stomach. And these glands primarily secrete mucus. This mucus is usually helped to protect the stomach lining from stomach acids and digestive system. So this area or this cardiac gland is usually responsible for producing mucus. The second gland is called oxynetic gland. This gland is found in the fundus. The fundus is around here, the fundus region, and also the body region, meaning this oxynetic gland is found in the large majority of the stomach part. So these glands secrete gastric juices, which includes hydrochloric acids, pepsinogens, which is an inactive form of pepsin enzyme, an enzyme responsible for protein digestions, and also intrinsic factor. An intrinsic factor is a glycoproteins which help protect the vitamin B12 and also help the absorption process of vitamin B12. We'll discuss this a little bit more in detail later, but we'll definitely delve into it when we are discussing the vitamin B12 metabolism. The third glands that are found in the stomach is called pyloric glands. The pyloric glands actually located in the anterum regions of the stomach, which is at the end or at the bottom parts of the stomach. And these pyloric glands secrete mucus and gastrin hormones that help stimulate the productions of gastric acids. Actually, gastrin is the one which helps the gastric acids, but the mucus is helping to protect the inside part of the stomach from self-digestions or by the actions of the hydrochloric acids. Sorry. In addition, these glands contains different types of cells with very specific functions inside the stomach glands. The main cell types that are found in the stomach glands or in these three glands includes parietal cells, chief cells, mucosa neck cells, surface mucosa cells, and G cells. Let us discuss a little bit more about these cells and their locations. The first one is parietal cells, or it can also be called oxynetic cells, because this is located alongside with the oxynetic glands. As I described earlier in the previous slide, this oxynetic gland is found in the fundus and the body part of the stomach, which covers a lot of areas. So this parietal cell is found in the oxynetic glands. So their key role is creating acidic environment necessary for digestion, meaning they are responsible for producing hydrochloric acids, which will in turn activating the pepsinogens into pepsins and aiding in bacterial eliminations as well. It also produces intrinsic factors which are essential for vitamin B12 metabolism. This parietal cell here is indicated as in this yellow picture, which is found at the base part in between the chief cell here. Between the chief cell, these yellow parts are the one which is called parietal or oxynetic cell. As I showed you in the previous slide, here there is a mucosa layer. In the mucosa layer, there are a gastric pit. These are the gastric pits. These openings are called the gastric pits. And inside the gastric pit, there are gastric glands. And also these gastric glands contains different kinds of cells. These are the one which is I showed you in this illustrative picture here. So this parietal cell is found in between the chief cells around the bases of the gastric pit or the gastric gland in corpus. The next cell is called chief cell or zymogenic cells. These are predominantly situated at the bases of oxynetic glands. So this chief cell is also responsible for producing proenzymes called pepsinogens. Pepsinogen is converted into pepsins, which is the active form of pepsinogens, which is responsible for protein digestions, and its activities will be increased, or the conversions of pepsinogen into pepsin is happening due to the acidic environment by the hydrochloric acid. This chief cell is found a little bit of more in quantity as compared to parietal cells, and it's found in the base and also in the neck of the gastric pit. So it's predominantly found in the oxynetic gland, meaning it's found in the largest majority of the stomach, including the fundus and the body part or the body regions of the stomach. So its main purpose is to produce proenzyme called pepsinogen. The third one is mucous neck cell. The mucous neck cell is described as like a kind of light brown color, which is this one. This mucous neck cell is found in the neck of the gastric pit, and primarily this mucous neck cell is found in the oxynetic glands, like the chief cell and the parietal cells, and located between the chief cells and the surface mucosa cell. And their main purpose is to secrete a mucus, which is used to protecting the internal parts of the stomach from self-digestions and also lubrications of food while during the digestion process. The next cell that is found in the gastric glands are surface mucosa cells or alveolar cell. The surface mucosal cell is present throughout the stomach lining. It's found in all over the gastric or the stomach linings, including the cardiac glands. As I said earlier, the cardiac gland is found in the cardiac regions of the stomach, which is the top part or the first part of the stomach, which is connecting with the esophagus. It also found in all types of the stomach glands, and its primary function is to secrete a mucus for stomach lining protections against acid digestive juices, and it also used as a lubricant, aiding in food passages. Okay. And the last cell is a G cell, or called gastrin producing cell, or we can also call it endocrine cells. This cell is found at the base of pyloric glands. As I said earlier, this pyloric gland is found at the anterior part of the stomach, which is the lowest bottom part of the stomach. And its main function is to secrete a hormone called gastrin. This gastrin stimulates gastric acid productions by oxygenatic glands, and it also regulates the digestive processes. Basically, it regulates the digestive secretion processes. And this, to summarize what I'm saying, the cell compositions of the gastric glands is vary depending on their locations. For example, the cardiac glands, which is found at the tip of the stomach, predominantly contains the mucosal cells, which is responsible for producing the mucus. The second gland, which is oxygenatic glands, contains parietal cells, chief cells, and mucosal cells. This oxygenatic gland is the one which is cover the large portions of the stomach, which include the fundus and the body regions. The third gland, which is a pyloric glands, predominantly contain the G cells or gastrin producing cells and also the mucosal cells. So these are how the cells are located in different regions of the stomach and do their actions. Okay. Having said this, let me describe about the gastric juices, which is the most important part of the digestion process inside the stomach. Here, in this picture, this is a 3D pictures, which is stomach, which contains the gastric juices. And this the second part of the picture is the real stomach part, and this liquid is gastric juices, and these are the extract of the gastric juices from the stomachs, and they put it in the beaker. And as you can see here, this one is a clear solutions, which is a light yellowish color, and this one is a little bit turbid. The turbidity is actually coming from the concentrations of the mucus inside the gastric juices. So, having said this, let's describe what gastric juice is and what its composition is. Gastric juice is a clear or slightly yellowish, highly acidic fluids produced by glands in the linings of the stomachs. It plays a vital role in the initial stages of digestion by breaking down foods into a semi-liquid mixtures called chyme. Previously, we said that after the oral cavity digestions, we found a product called semi-liquid products called bolus. Now, After the digestions of the stomach, we will find a chyme. Both of them are a semi-liquid mixture. However, chyme is much more liquid than a bolus. So the final product of the gastric or the stomach digestion is a chyme. And these gastric juices constitutes different kinds of components, or it constitutes different kinds of components, including water. The water part encompasses about from 95 to 97%, meaning 95 to 97% of the gastric juice is water. And this water will be excreted along with other components of the gastric juices by the cells that are mentioned earlier. However, a large majority of the waters can also be coming from the drinking water. In addition, the swallowed food products from the oral cavities will also contain saliva, which contains a large amount of water, but its percentage is a little bit smaller as compared to the water which is produced by the stomach along with other components in the form of gastric juices or the drinking water. The second component is electrolytes. This concentration is about estimated around 1%, but it varies by the persons and the type of diet. The third and the most important one is hydrochloric acids. These acids contains about from 0.5 up to 1% in the gastric juice compositions. And the fourth one is enzyme. There are about 3 types of enzyme exist in the stomach, which include the pepsin enzyme, which is responsible for protein digestions. The second one is gastric lipase, which is responsible for lipid or fat digestions. And also the third enzyme which is found in the stomach is salivary alpha amylase. Technically, this salivary alpha amylase is coming from the oral cavities along with the bolus inside the saliva. However, its activities is minimal in the stomach because it's immediately deactivated by the high concentrations of acidity by the hydrochloric acid. So we can say that its action is very, very limited inside the stomach. However, this enzyme combined together will account around 0.3 up to 0.7% of the gastric juices. And the fifth one is the mucus. The mucus is the most important part of the gastric juices. It accounts from 1 to 3%. And the sixth one is an intrinsic factor, which is less than 0.01%. I will discuss a little bit more about the intrinsic factor later. So, gastric juice is a very highly acidic liquid. Typically, the pH of these gastric juices ranging from 1.5 to 3. So, hydrochloric acids or HCl is a major contributor to this acidity of the gastric juices. Per day, about 2 liters, ranging from 1 liter to 3 liters of gastric juice is secreted by the human beings each day. So every day we produce about 2 liters of gastric juices. However, this amount of juices will be ranged from 1 to 3 liters depending on ages and also medical conditions. So let us discuss the role of each constituent of the gastric juice. As I said earlier, the gastric juice constitutes the large amount of water, which is 95 to 97%, which is the abundant components of the gastric juices. And this water are used as a solvent. As we all know, water is the most active solvent or very important solvent. And this water part will facilitate the enzymatic digestion process by dissolving and also breaking down of food particles. The second one is hydration. Hydration means maintaining the hydration level of the stomach, which promotes the movement and mixing of food with gastric secretions for effective digestion. The third one is liquefaction or liquidifications of the foods. The water helps to liquidify the foods and then makes it easier for enzyme to access and break down nutrients. The fourth one is transport medium. So water acts as a transport medium which facilitates the movement of digested nutrients and digestive substances within the stomach, which will aid in their transportation into the small intestine. It also regulates the pH, which helps to dilute and modulate the acidity of the gastric juice, which ensures optimal pH for enzymatic activities and digestion. So next we can discuss about the role of electrolytes in the gastric juice. These electrolytes can be help us maintaining fluid balances. Electrolyte like sodium, potassium will regulate fluid movements between the stomach and the bloodstreams and also ensure proper hydrations within the stomach and prevent dehydrations of the stomach linings. In addition, they also optimize the enzyme activities. Specifically, there are some specific electrolytes concentrations which will create a favorable environment for enzymes like pepsins to function efficiently, which will aid in the breakdowns of proteins. They also help us for muscle functions. Electrolytes will contribute to the muscle contractions in the stomach wall, which will facilitating the mixing and movement of the food during digestion. In addition, they also act as an electrical conductivity. Electrolytes help conduct electrical impulses within the stomach lining, which potentially will regulate the digestive process, such as muscle contractions and gastric juice secretions. Next, let's discuss the role of hydrochloric acid in the gastric juice. This HCl actually will make the acidifications of the gastric contents. As we said earlier, the gastric environment is very acidic, which is depending on the HCl. HCl is the one which makes the gastric environment or the gastric juice acidic. So HCl contribute to the acidic pH of the gastric juice, which will create an environment which is optimal for enzymatic activities and protein digestion. Meaning, it activates the pepsinogens, which is the inactive form of pepsins. So when this pepsinogen is produced, this HCl environment or the acidic environment will help the conversions of or the activations of this zymogen pepsinogen into its active form. It's called pepsins. And this pepsin is necessary for protein digestions by breaking down the peptide bonds which is found between the amino acids. This HCl will also help to denature the protein molecules, meaning hydrochloric acid denatures the proteins by disrupting their tertiary and secondary structure. Actually, we'll discuss more in details when we are discussing the protein metabolism. But to see the role of the HCl here as a part of the gastric juices, we can say that it helps us for the denaturations of the proteins, meaning it will disrupt the tertiary and the secondary structures of proteins. And this will expose the interior peptide bonds for the pepsin enzyme to act on it and to break it down into smaller pieces. So this process facilitates the enzymatic functions and particularly by the pepsin enzyme. Hydrochloric acid also helps to release of nutrients, meaning HCl or hydrochloric acid help release various nutrients including minerals such as zinc, iron, and something like that from organic complexes. In most of the time, minerals and some vitamins are found in the food, which is bounded by the organic complex, usually the protein complex. So when we are finding the zinc from animal products, the zinc is actually bounded by the protein molecules. When we are saying the hemi iron, which is from the animal sources, it is bounded by the protein molecules. When we are saying vitamin B12 from the food products, from animal products specifically, it is bounded by the protein molecule. So when these nutrients are coming into the stomach, along with or bounded by the organic complex called proteins, they will be disintegrated from the organic matrix or the proteins, and they will be exist as a single unit, or they will be freed from their protein matrix, so they become free. Some of them can sustain that acidic environment, but in the case of vitamin B12, it will be rescued by the intrinsic factors or the glycoproteins. I will discuss it a little bit more later. In addition to that, hydrochloric acid is also used as a bactericidal actions, meaning it still acts as or killing bacteria which is ingested along with the foods, thus which will actually prevent the potential infections and also maintaining gastrointestinal health. But food safety is actually the most important part of food and nutrition studies, because there are some pathogenic microorganisms that can be contaminate our foods, and depending on the degree of the contaminations of the foods, those bacteria, viruses, and also fungus can pass through the stomachs and will affect our intestinal systems, which will lead to diarrhea and also other health complications. So it's always be careful when we are preparing foods, and before we are eating the food, we have to make sure that that food is safe enough or away from those health hazards that includes bacterial or microbial hazards or chemical hazards or physical hazards. But here, HCl or hydrochloric acids have the capacity to kill some bacteria which are ingested along with the food. So next, let's discuss the role of enzyme in the gastric digestion. As I said earlier, there are three types of enzymes which will be existed in the stomach: the pepsins, the gastric lipase, and the salivary alpha amylase. The pepsin is produced by the chief cells in the gastric glands, as I said earlier. Then it will become the part of the gastric juices, and it has different functions. The main function is breaking down protein molecules into smaller peptides, and also it's initiating the protein digestions in the stomach. Actually, the main chemical digestions that are happening in the stomach is the initial digestions of long chain or polypeptides into simpler peptide protein molecules. The role of pepsin is cleaving the peptide bonds, which leads to the hydrolysis of proteins into simpler peptides. The second enzymes that are found in the gastric juice is gastric lipase. The producing cell is a chief cells and the mucosa neck cell in gastric glands. And its main function is hydrolyzing dietary fats into fatty acids and glycerols, and initiating lipid digestions in the stomach. And the main role of the gastric lipase is breaking down the triacylglycerides into smaller lipid molecules. And this gastric lipase is actually responsible for about 20% of lipid digestions in the stomach. So the rest of the digestions will happen in the small intestines by the pancreatic lipase or the lipase enzyme, which is produced by the pancreas. We will discuss it in our subsequent next videos. The third enzyme that exist in the stomach is salivary alpha amylase. Actually, this enzyme is produced in the oral cavities, and its activity will be lowered by the lower pH in the gastric juices, but its function is to initiate the carbohydrate digestions in the mouth by breaking it down into smaller molecules from starch to maltose and dextrins. But its activity in the stomach is very small. The next component of the gastric juice is mucus in gastric juice. And this mucus is comprising about 1 to 3% of gastric juice, and actually which will serve multiple essential functions in the gastric digestions. The first one is protective barriers and preventions of self-digestions. I'm mentioning it a little bit in the previous slides. And this mucus forms like a kind of protective barrier that coats the stomach linings so that it's safeguarding it from the corrosive effects of the gastric acids and the digestive enzymes. And this physical barrier also prevents self-digestions and also reduces the risks of ulcer formations. Sometimes when there is no enough mucus productions due to some health complications, the stomach part or the stomach linings will be digested by the digestive enzymes and the acids, which will create an ulcer, which is one of the morbidities associated with stomach problems. The second role of the mucus is lubrication. Mucus lubricate the stomach linings, which facilitate the smooth passage of the foods and reducing friction during peristalsis. So our food is solid, so when it's digested by the peristalsis and also churning operations, which is a mechanical digestion process, it should be lubricated. Otherwise, it will create frictions and create an impact on our stomach. So the mucus is also helping us to lubricate the system and reduce the frictions. The third one is it will facilitate the digestive process. Mucus help maintain the ideal microenvironment for enzymatic activities, which ensures optimal conditions for digestion. The fourth one is cellular protection. Mucus contains factors that promote tissue repairs and regenerates, which will contribute to the maintenance of the gastric health. The last one is an intrinsic factor. The role of the intrinsic factor, as I said earlier, is associated with vitamin B12 absorption and protection. The intrinsic factor, though present in only a tiny trace amount, which is about less than 0.01% within the gastric juice, and it plays a very critical role in vitamin B12 absorptions. Here is how it works. Vitamin B12 bindings. As I said earlier, vitamin B12s are coming from animal source products mostly, and also some vegetables as well. And it's usually coming from binded with an organic matrix called proteins. And inside the stomach, these proteins will be digested by the digestive enzymes and also with the actions of hydrochloric acids. After that, the vitamin B12 become free inside the stomach. However, this free vitamin B12 is very susceptible to be vanished, so that the intrinsic factor, which is a kind of glycoproteins produced by a specialized cell in the stomach linings, have to be come and bind with this vitamin B12. So it creates the vitamin B12 and intrinsic factor bindings or mixture. So this vitamin B12, as I said earlier, which is coming from animal products, so that once bound to the intrinsic factor, vitamin B12 is actually protected from degradations by the stomach acids. This complex, which is the intrinsic factors in the vitamin B12, then travels through the digestive system until it reaches into the small intestines. So the vitamin B12 is accompanied by the intrinsic factor for a protections inside the stomach and also for transportation throughout the digestive system. Then it will reach into the small intestines. During the absorptions in the small intestines, the lower part of the small intestine, which is the ileum, the intrinsic factors and the vitamin B12 complex bind to specific receptors on the intestinal wall. And these bindings trigger a process that allows the vitamin B12 to be absorbed into the blood streams. Actually, we'll delve deep into these discussions when we are discussing about the B12 metabolism. However, intrinsic factor as a component of the gastric juices has a role in protecting the B12 inside the stomach since it's freed from the original protein molecules. And these protein molecules will be digested by the HCl and pepsin enzyme actions. Then the freed vitamin B12 has to be rescued by these intrinsic factors and also used for absorptions in the small intestine. So having said this, uh, let's go to and discuss how this gastric secretion is regulated. As you may know, gastric juice secretion is not a constant process, meaning we do not hold that 2 liter amounts of gastric juice every time the whole day, meaning it's meticulously regulated by a complex interplay of the nervous and the hormonal signals to ensure that optimal digestions based on the presence and the type of the food. So that this gastric juice will be produced when we are thinking of about the foods and when also ingested the foods and also when it's leaving the systems into the small intestines. So this regulation processes actually occurs in 3 distinct phases. The first phase is the cephalic phase. I discussed this a little bit more in the oral cavity discussions. This phase is actually can be called seeing and smelling phases. The second phase is the gastric phases, which is the tasting of the foods and also swallowing of the food phase. And the third phase is the intestinal phase, which is the feedback and the control phase. Let us discuss each one by one. The first one, which is the cephalic phase, which is the seeing and the smelling phase. When we see the stimulus, in this phase is kick off even before food enters the stomach, meaning when we are seeing the food, when we are smelling the food from distance, or when we are thinking about the foods, or when we are anticipating that the food is coming, these perceptions or these sensorial perceptions can trigger the cephalic phase secretions of the digestive juices. And as in the pathway, the nervous systems play the lead role here. When the sensory informations about the food travel through the vagus nerve or the wandering nerve to the brain stems, and certain hormones like gastrin also releasing peptide GRP, which will be released from the hippocampus, can also stimulate the gastric acid secretions during these phases. So even before we are eating the foods, due to the seeing it or smelling it or thinking about it, the gastric juice secretions will start due to the actions of the nervous systems, so that our body or our stomach is getting prepared or getting ready to accept the incoming foods. When we see the secretion part during the cephalic phase, The secretions contribute to about 30% of the total gastric juice productions, meaning 30% of the total gastric juice is produced even before the food is entering into the foods due to seeing or smelling or thinking about the foods. And it primarily stimulates the secretions of hydrochloric acids and some digestive enzymes. In the second phase, which is the gastric phase, which is the tasting and the swallowing phase, the stimulus is this phase comes into play once the food is actually entering into our stomach. So the presence of the foods in the stomach trigger mechanoreceptors or the stretch receptors in the stomach wall and taste receptors on the tongue. So when food is touching our tongues and also touching our stomach, this gastric phase of gastric secretion regulations will start. When we see the pathway, both the nervous systems and the hormonal signals are involved. Specifically, the vagus nerve is stimulated by the mechanoreceptors and the taste receptors in our tongue, sending signals to the brain first, and also this brain will send a signal to the stomach to increase its secretions. From the hormone point of view, gastrins, which is a hormone produced by the G cells in the stomach lining, is released in response to food peptides, partially broken down proteins and stomach destinations. Gastrin further stimulates acid secretions. When we see the total productions of the secreted gastric juices in the gastric phase is the most potent stimulators of gastric juice productions. So it will contribute about 60% of the total gastric juice productions, and it primarily increases HCl secretions and enzyme releases, meaning the gastric phase and the cephalic phase combined together produce 90% of the gastric juices. The third phase is called the intestinal phase, which is the feedback and the control phase. Here, this phase takes place as partially digested foods, which is the chyme, as I described earlier, which will exit the stomachs and entering into the small intestines. When we see the pathway here, both inhibitory and stimulatory signals plays a role in order to control the chyme entering into the small intestine, so that this acidic nature has to be controlled, so that inhibition as well as stimulation signals will be released according to or based on the real existing scenarios, so that fatty acids and acidic chyme in the small intestines will trigger the release of a hormone called cholecytokinin, which is CCK, and also secretin hormones. And these hormones send slow down signals to the stomach, meaning via the vagus nerve and also the blood streams, which will inhibiting gastric acid secretion. So the gastric acid or the gastric juice secretions will be minimized based on by the actions of these cholecytokinin and secretin enzymes, which are there called slow down signals. Conversely, some breakdown products of proteins might stimulate again the release of hormone like gastrins in the small intestines, promoting the continued low-level acid secretion. So there is also a signal for producing more, and also there is a signal called lowering the gastric acid or the gastric juice secretions in this intestinal phase. The intestinal phase acts as a fine-tuning mechanisms which ensure that the stomach doesn't overwhelm the small intestine with too much acidic chyme at once. Having discussed that concepts, let's go delve into, or let's discuss a little bit about the transit time in the stomach. When we are saying that transit time in the stomach, meaning in the stomach, which refers to the duration the duration that takes place for food to move from the stomach from the time of ingestion until it is emptied into the small intestines. So the time spent in the stomach until it leaves into the small intestine is called the transit time in the case of stomach. So the complete liquefations of chyme is not actually necessary for the stomach contents to empty into the duodenum, which occurs via the pyloric sphincters found at the junctions of the antrum and the duodenum. So that the particle size as large as 3 millimeter in diameter or 1/8 inch size can be emptied from the stomach through the sphincter. But solid particles are usually emptied with fluid when they have been degraded to a diameter of about 2 millimeters or less, and approximately from 1 to 5 milliliters or up to 1 teaspoons of chyme were entering the duodenum about twice per minute. So every minute there are two teaspoons of chyme is entering into the duodenum or the small intestines by an aggressive force, meaning that the stomach is like pumping the chyme into the small intestines every minute, like two teaspoons per minute. And this pumping also creates like a kind of, we call it like a kind of squirting, which will create like shear force, which make like physically mixing the food product. It also creates some kind of emulsions in the case of fats. Totally, the gastric emptying process following a meal is usually takes between 1 up to 4 hours. So once the food digestion is started in the stomach, so the produced chyme is constantly leaving the stomach into the small intestine. So meaning it doesn't wait all the food products to be digested or converted into chyme in order to leave the system per minute to the small intestine. So it will give time for the small intestine for further digestions and also absorption. In general, the gastric emptying will take from 1 to 4 hours, depending on several factors. So these several factors that can influence the transit time in the stomach include the type and the amount of food consumed, meaning some food products requires a longer time to digest, such as proteins, and fat requires a large amount of time. In addition, if we ate like too much amount of food, it will take like more time than the amount we consume in a smaller amount. Usually, we face some trouble in transit time in our stomach during the holiday periods. Usually, in holidays, we eat like large quantities of animal product like meats, chicken, something like that in larger quantities, which will affect our transit times and create some kind of discomfort or holiday discomforts. The second factors which will influence the transit time include the size and consistency of food particles. Some food particles are very small outside already, but some food particles are solid outside. So that size and consistency of the particles will actually affect our transit times. Some food products, for example, like breads that are sold along with some sandwiches in some like well-known burger selling industries. If you see the bread, it's very smooth, meaning I think the wheat flour is digested outside by enzyme treatment, so its texture is very smooth and delicate, which requires very small amount of digestion in the intestine. in the stomach. So size and consistency of the food particles have an impact. The third one is stomach contractile activities. When we say the stomach contractile activities, which is actually regulated by hormones such as gastrins, motilins, or cholecystokinin or CCK, which is controlling the muscle contractions to mix breakdowns of the foods and propel food towards the small intestine. So any kind of problems in these hormones may affect our transit time. There is also a conditions like gastroparesis, which is a kind of morbidities in the stomach, which can significantly prolong the transit times and which leads to a symptom like nausea, vomitings, and abdominal kind of discomforts. And transit time within the stomach is crucial, very crucial for proper mixing, breakdowns, and propulsions of food during digestions. Having said that, let's summarize the actions that occur in the small intestines. The main action in the stomach is digestion, which is resulted in the formations of chyme. Chyme is a semi-liquid mixture of partially digested food, gastric juice, and digestive enzymes. Chyme is a mixture of these three very important components. So after digestions in the stomach, this chyme is emptied into the small intestine for further digestions and absorptions of nutrients. We can categorize these actions into two. The first one is digestions, as I said earlier, which is the main actions that's happening in the stomach. These digestions can be either mechanical digestions or chemical digestions. Both of them are happening. And also there is limited amounts of absorption is also happening in the stomach. Let us discuss this further in detail. The digestions that occur in the stomach is primarily of two types, which is mechanical digestions and chemical digestion. The mechanical digestions in the stomach involves physical process that breaks down the food into smaller particles without changing its chemical composition. This process in the stomach is primarily achieved through muscular contractions and mixing movements, including peristalsis and churning. So there are two kinds of mechanical digestions, peristalsis and churning. The stomach muscles contract rhythmically to push and mix the food with the gastric juices. This helps break down the large food particles into smaller fragments and mix them thoroughly with the digestive juices. The churning part is the stomach muscles contract vigorously and causing the foods in the gastric juice to mix thoroughly. These mechanical actions help further break down the food particles into smaller pieces and ensures that they are uniformly mixed with digestive enzymes and gastric juices. The second type of digestion that is happening in the stomach is the chemical digestions. The chemical digestions involves the breakdowns of food molecules into simpler substances by the digestive enzymes and acids present in the stomach. Actually, I discussed it a little bit when we are discussing the components of everything in the stomach. But to summarize, the actions that's happening in the stomach is digestions, which is mechanical and chemical digestions, and a little bit of limited absorptions. The main digestive juices in the stomach include hydrochloric acids and the digestive enzyme called pepsins and gastric lipase. Hydrochloric acids, as I said earlier in the previous slides that discuss the component of the gastric juices, the main actions of the hydrochloric acid is creating the acidic environments, which is convenient for the conversions of the pepsinogens into the active form of pepsins, which will be responsible for protein digestions. In addition to that, HCl also help to denature proteins, make them more accessible to enzymatic digestion. The pepsin enzymes, these enzymes is responsible for the breaking down of proteins into smaller peptides by cleaving the peptide bonds. The gastric lipase is responsible for the digestion of triacylglycerols or lipids into fatty acids and glycerols. When we see the absorption part, actually it's very limited, but while the stomach is primarily focusing on digestions, it does also absorb small quantities of alcohol, water, and certain minerals, including iodines and fluoride. However, when we are comparing these absorptions of this substance as compared to the small intestines, it's relatively minimal. In summary, the stomach plays a crucial role in the digestive system, serving primarily to facilitate the digestion of the food. And here are the summary of the key functions of the stomach. The first one is digestions. We discussed this more in detail previously. Mechanical digestions and chemical digestions. The primary nutrients that are digested is proteins and lipids, and also the food matrix. I mean, the larger particle size of the food will be converted into smaller pieces called chyme or semi-liquid mixture. But technically speaking, the nutrients that are digested in the stomach is proteins and lipids, which are a partial kind of digestions, and the complete digestions will happen in the small intestine along with absorptions. The second role of the stomach is a temporal food storage, meaning while it's digested, it's also stored in the stomach for about 4 hours, depending on the type of the type and size of the foods. And also the stomach will help to kill pathogens with the help of HCl, and also productions of intrinsic factor, which is a factor helping the B12 in the form of protections, transportations, and absorptions in the small intestine. Having said that, let us do some quizzes and test ourselves. You can pause the videos and read these questions and try to answer those questions for yourself and evaluate yourself. So what is stomach? What are the major 4 regions of stomach? What are the different layers of stomach muscle, and what is their role as a muscle? What is rug and its role? What are the layers and structures of the stomach wall, and what are their roles? Describe the main type of stomach glands, their roles, and their locations. What are the main cell type found in the stomach glands, their roles, and their predominant locations or in the gland? Define gastric juices. List its constituents and describe the role of each constituent of the gastric juices. Describe the 3 distinct phases of gastric secretion regulations. Define the transit time in the stomach and describe factors influencing it. What are the actions occur in the stomach? The major actions that are occurring in the stomach. Which nutrients undergo digestions in the stomach? And what are the role of stomach acid? These are the quiz that I prepared for you. So you can ask yourself and give an answer for you for it and evaluate it as compared to the lecture materials. You can also Google and increase your knowledge about topics we are just discussing. Okay, having said that, our next video will be on describing in more detail about the small intestines. I mean, understanding the role of each organs is very important while we are dealing each nutrient. So in our next videos, we'll discussing about the small intestines. As always, our final slide is about introducing the music I love for your relaxations after watching these videos. The today's song that I select for you is the song title is I Still Believe. This music were originally sung by Brenda K. Starr in 1987. And this music was also sung by as a cover by the former backup singer Mariah Carey and the current legendary singer, which is one of my favorite singer in the world. And before she became famous and achieved successes, she released I Still Believe song as a single in 1999, which is the most beautiful song I ever heard. So I will put the link for you after this video. You can go to the comment sections and open the link and enjoy, or you can also search it by yourself by the title I Still Believe by Mariah Carey or Brenda K. Starr. So I prefer the Mariah Carey version because it's become like a kind of improved versions of the song. Thank you so much for listening this video. Don't forget to subscribe my channel and also hitting the bell or the notification bell. Thank you so much. See you next time.